Hey, welcome to Ham Radio Perspectives. I'm Tom, WA9TDD.
And I'm Quinn, K8QS. Great topic again, Tom. We just did a video on the best height for a dipole. Now we're looking at verticals, and it's a whole different thing. While height dictates the entire takeoff angle for a horizontal dipole, the rules change completely for HF vertical. A vertical is natively a low angle radiator by design.
Right. For a vertical, changing the height above ground is less about changing where the signal goes and more about managing your ground losses and changing how you build your radial system.
Yeah, that's great, Tom. So here's what happens when you move a vertical from the dirt into the air. Okay, so let's first look at ground mounted. In other words, the height is 0. When a quarter wave vertical is mounted right on the earth, the ground acts as the other half of the antenna. All right? The problem is ground loss. Dirt is a terrible conductor. If you just drive a ground rod, up to 50% or more of your transmit power will be absorbed by the earth as heat in what's called the near field. And Tom, this is what I did. I don't know if you did it too with my early Gotham verticals.
Yes,
I just
indeed.
pounded in one ground rod, thought that would work, attached the antenna to it, and we were probably losing over 50% of the power right into the earth. So what's the solution? The solution is to make a ground-mounted vertical efficient by laying down a lot of what we call radials. Okay, ideally 30 to 60 radials. So like a ground plane antenna now, you're making the other half of that vertical antenna, these radials that are horizontal underneath the ground. And those will often be for a monoband, or let's say a quarter wavelength. So the vertical coming up is a quarter wavelength, and then you've got quarter wavelength ground radials underneath, pinned to the grass or just buried in the ground. It doesn't make any difference. About performance, with a good radial field, a ground-mounted vertical produces a single fat, low-angle lobe hugging the horizon. That sucker is really low. It's hugging the horizon. So that's why with a lot of radials and a vertical anchored right on the ground, you have got yourself one spectacular DX antenna, especially if you live near salt water, which we've talked about before, which acts as a perfect far field reflector. But even without that, this is the way to do it, Tom.
Right. And now if you slightly elevated the antenna, 2 to 20 feet above the ground, where you're not dealing so much with ground loss, you're elevating the base of the vertical antenna slightly off the ground, completely changes the physics of the counterpoise.
Now, just to be clear, Tom, people may not know this. The counterpoise is what we're talking about, not the vertical part of the antenna,
right?
But what you've got horizontally.
Correct. What would normally be buried in the ground is your radial field. And the radial shift because the antenna is no longer coupled to the lossy earth. You can no longer need to use dozens of random length wires. Instead, you can use tuned resonant radials coming off of the base of the antenna and being elevated a few feet off the ground. It doesn't need to be on the ground. It does be a few feet, maybe 4, 5, 6 feet off the ground. The magic trade-off is that because they are in the air and highly efficient, you only need 2 to 4 radials per band. Efficiently wise, a vertical antenna elevated at 10 feet with just 4 tuned radials will often match or outperform a ground-mounted vertical with 60 buried radials because the near-field ground losses are practically eliminated. The takeoff angle, the main radiation lobe, drops even lower towards the horizon, making it a lethal DX antenna.
Yeah, and to get into this, Tom, you and I did a video down near Indianapolis where I had my mini home along, and then we were reviewing the Radiodity vertical, manufactured vertical, and we put it out on the ground and put the 3 radials that come with it out there. And then I said, Tom, okay, let's put it up on top of the motorhome. The problem with that motorhome is, of course, it's like most of them, it's it's fiberglass. So there's no real great ground, but you can put the radials across it. So that immediately brought the vertical up to, I'd guess, about 15 feet or so. And so we tested that out, and I'll put a link to that video that we did down below. So what Tom just said is so critically important. You need a lot of radials if that antenna is on the ground. And as you start moving it up, and it doesn't have to be too far, you get it away from the ground and ground loss, you don't need as many radials. And so that's wonderful. Now, what about highly elevated? Suppose you're putting that radial way up in the air, a half wavelength or higher. You might think that if elevating a vertical 10 feet is good, putting it on top of your 60-foot tower would be amazing. In reality, it ruins the pattern of the vertical. You heard me right. You get what's called pattern fragmentation. As you raise a vertical to a half wavelength or higher, the radiation pattern splinters. Instead of one powerful low-angle lobe pushing out towards the horizon, the signal breaks into multiple lobes. And now you don't know where your signal's going, and some of those lobes are going to be powerful on the horizon and others are not. So you get a lot of wasted energy. A significant amount of your RF energy gets shot straight up into the sky, broop, at high angles, 50 to 60 degrees. Some verticals are usually chosen specifically for low-angle DX. Pushing the high-angle radiation defeats the purpose of the vertical antenna. You don't need height.
All right. So summarize the general rule of thumb for verticals. If you want to mount it on the ground, be prepared to lay down at least 30 radials to overcome the Earth's absorption. Basically, anything over 30 radials buried in the ground is you're getting diminishing returns. So, don't break your back putting in 60 radials. If you want maximum efficiency with minimal wire, elevate the base of the vertical, 5 to 15 feet in the air, and use just 2 or 4 perfectly tuned resonant radials sloping down away from the base.
Tom, that reminds me of the real popular CB ground planed antennas. I don't know if they still make them or not, where the people would put them up on their roof, or they'd, put them somewhere up a little bit in the backyard. And then those manufactured verticals or ground planes would have usually 3 radials hanging down, the metal hanging down. And then as they get older, those radials start falling off.
Right. Besides that, avoid high elevations unless you're using a specialized design like halfway verticals such as the Cushcraft R8 that doesn't need radials. Do not mount a standard quarter wave vertical on a high tower.
Right. To clarify that last point about avoiding high elevation and then talking about the Cushcraft one, some of the antennas that are sold out there as verticals are actually vertical dipoles.
Right.
So they're fed in the middle or somewhere higher up. And that's a whole different phenomenon that we're not talking about here today, but we should do a video on that, Tom. Now, to conclude this another way, one of the experts on vertical height above the ground is Rudy N6LF. He's written a lot in QST and done a lot of research on this. And I thought it'd be fun to read from one of his articles about this. He says, the difference between a 32 radial monoband system on the ground and a 4 radial elevated monoband system on each band are small, as you would expect. Okay. If we compare, get this, a 16 radial multi-band system on the ground with the same configuration elevated, the elevated system has about 1 dB advantage on all bands. Doubling the number of radials on the ground will reduce the differences by 0.2 or 0.3 dB. That's not much. The standard multi-band system works just fine if elevated, but when the radials are lying on the ground, it's not quite as good. If a radial system lies on the ground, the rule is you should use more radials to achieve compatible performance. So that's what we've been talking about. We hope this helps you with verticals. It's, Tom has his great vertical there in Indiana. How many radials do you have on that one? It's ground mounted.
I've got 32 total radials, and they're all cut for different bands. So I'm able to work Pretty much 40 meters through 10 meters without too much of a tuner.
Yeah, so you did the work on that.
Yeah.
But don't assume with a vertical antenna on the ground, if you don't put those radials in there, just put a couple of copper ground rods or whatever, it's not going to worth diddle. So don't go that way. We hope this has been helpful. How high should your vertical be and what are the considerations for it? Whether it's manufactured or you make it yourself, it's the same. This is Ham Radio Perspectives. I'm Quinn, K8QS.
I'm Tom, WA9TDD.
Please subscribe. Give us a thumbs up if you like this. Any other ideas, we'd be happy to address them in videos. 73, everybody.